The first night's the toughest. No doubt about it. They march you in naked as the day you were born. Skin burning and half blind from that delousing shit they throw on you. And when they put you in that cell, and those bars slam home, that's when you know it's for real. Old life blown away in the blink of an eye. Nothing left but all the time in the world to think about it.
And what can I say, my beloved truth seekers? What can I truly say besides my heartfelt welcome that I haven't said before? It's the 140th show of Aeon Byte, formerly known as Coffee, Cigarettes, and Gnosis, on a 3.5-year crusade to open the doorways of perception to the faiths almost forgotten, and the circling of the metaphysical wagons against the liver-eating vultures of fundamentalism.
We don't want cooperation. We want conversion. We want repentance.
What can I say that I haven't said before? What can I say that hasn't already been written about Gnosticism? Is there anything more to declare, clarify, or confound you with? The answer is, of course, there is, and our myriad and gentle guests have and will prove it over and over again, even when you have to stomach my stale drivel and incongruous special effects. But at least cats tell me all the time they enjoy the background music.
Does the expression, "no man is an island," ring any bells?
Does the expression, "shut your ass up," ring any bells?
Like Hans Jonas once wrote, Gnosticism takes a sort of trained musical ear to grasp, process, and immerse yourself into. Gnosticism is the jazz of the religious world. It is individualistic yet communal, extrovert in its intimate expression, adaptive, liquid, syncretic, dynamic, prone to improvisation depending on the audience, and allows its intrinsic joy and curiosity to spread where it must while being loyal to its principles and accompanying musicians. It seemingly loses itself, gains its apex above all boundaries of imagination or logic, yet remains faithful to its artistic joy and melancholy.
One time, at band camp, I stuck a flute in my...
Once Louis Armstrong told a reporter that if you're gonna have to ask what jazz is, then you're probably never gonna know what it is. And Gnosticism is similar because all the studying, all the information, and all the speculation of this worldview are but whale hemorrhoids when the real ambergris is not the learning, but the experience of Gnosis cultivated through the mysteries. And quoting Aristotle yet again, a mystery is not something you learn, but something you undergo. Transformation moves forward. A phoenix doesn't bother looking at its ashes.
A fabulous bird, reborn from the ashes of its earlier life.
Don't get me wrong, my beloved truth seekers. Gnosticism is a rational discipline in its early stages. Gnostics have almost always been mercurial philosophers, curious freethinkers, and artists who confronted the hardest of life questions, and social critics of the highest caliber. Yet knowledge and thought are but lower ladders in our attainment of individuation, our own crucifixion into our higher selves, and our eventual redemption into wearing the clothing of Christ, and discarding the thin veils of death and ignorance we have all worn for so long in this predatory, lurid, and cosmic harem Jehovah and his archon set up for the purpose of their own entertainment.
A beautiful morning. Poseidon has blessed our voyage. Sometimes the gods bless you in the morning and curse you in the afternoon.
The true golden fleece exists in higher levels once we begin to remember those impossible to define promises Jesus assured us in the Gospel of Thomas, number 17. He says, "I will give you what no eye has seen, what no ear has heard, what no hand has touched, what has not arisen in the human heart." And what exactly are these impossible promises, these almost unspeakable answers? At the end of the proverbial day, you will have to find them yourself through your own personal adventure into Gnosis, that acquaintance with the divine. But let me give you the same old hint of the pathway that the perennial heretics of the ages, from Simon Magus to Alan Moore, have always taken. They wrote their own gospels and lived their own myth. As simple and difficult as that. And if you're gonna have to ask me more on this, then you'll probably end up in the domains of the psychics forever, tortured and scourged by the winds of societal demands and the whims of the vainglorious deities, tied to the chains on a post of conformity, mediocrity.
I can't help thinking somewhere in the universe there has to be something better than man.
But the choice is yours. You have always been. You have lifetimes to figure things out as I do, because I'm no better or worse than any of you. I'm just another outcast who didn't ask to be born. Another soul tied to the body of a dead animal, as W. Yeats, another great Gnostic, once wrote. And Yeats also wrote that man cannot know truth, only embody it. Again, think of writing your own gospel and living your own myth. But I do like the definition Father Jordan Stratford, in his alter ego of Saint Ratford, wrote in his blog about what it means to be a Gnostic. Catholic on the outside, Buddhist on the inside, quoting some dead Greek guys. Why not?
My time is precious. You're wasting it.
And our astral guest today certainly falls to high degrees into the three definitions of Gnosticism, the Gnostics, and Gnosis I've just mentioned. He's an innovative jazzy theologian, has written more than one gospel, and lives his own myth without apologies. And he certainly embodies to some extent the Saint Ratford Gnostic. And this is the wonderful Timothy Freke, or Tim as he likes to call himself these days, like the sorcerer from the Monty Python's Holy Grail.
I move for no man.
Tim sanctifies us for a third time at the virtual Alexandria, that state of mind where East meets West, and where Hypatia will make it home this time before the Christian mob pulls her off her chariot. It would be a surprise if any of you manifesting yourself here in your godly apparel hadn't read or heard of his many works. On his own, Tim has written various books ranging from Taoism to Hermeticism. With Peter Gandi, he entered the bestseller, award-winning circles with the Jesus Mysteries Trilogy and the satirical yet rousing The Gospel of the Second Coming. Orthodoxy and its Abrahamic Hydra heads never got it so bad. Gnosticism gained a major worldwide spotlight. Greek esoteric thought became hip again, and the mythicist cause made Joseph Campbell smile somewhere in the collective unconsciousness.
You know much that is hidden, though, Tim. Quite.
Tim, like any free-thinking, free-willing Gnostic, has continued to evolve. Presently a less scathing and more dulcified truth-seeker and lover of the esoterica, with his books Lucid Living and the new How Long Is Now, which we'll be discussing in our interview on this approximately Saturday, October 10th, the year of our Demiurge 2009.
Don't turn this into one of your big moral issues.
And it must be noted that Tim is the engine behind the Alliance for the Lucid Living, or the All as he calls it, a more or less satellite organization of postmodern heretics redefining and reinventing themselves through various seminars across the world. Some of the terms used by the All, like lucid living, big love, or deep awake, which we will address in our always damn fun chats, might seem odd to you, but they are no stranger than when you first heard such words as Gnosis, Aeons and Archons, Pleroma and Syzygies, and all that, yes, jazz. Have I mentioned about writing your own gospel and living your own myth in the recent past?
Sell crazy someplace else. We're all stocked up here.
Anywho, for more information on Tim and the Alliance for Lucid Living, please visit Tim Freke, timfreke.cam or theall.org. If he comes to your neck of the dark woods, you won't want to miss his stand-up philosophy, as he calls it. I know he came to Chicago some months ago, but I missed his talk at the local bookstore because I was in the grips of some stormy mood while enwrapped in writing a book, or was experimenting with a new religious praxis, or was dabbling with insanity, or maybe all of the above. I don't remember, but I won't miss the next one, Tim. I promise.
And we can't argue with destiny now, can we?
Personally, I found How Long Is Now as an enjoyable, poignant, and often daemon-expanding book that is a penetrating autobiography about a spiritual pilgrim named Tim in this disorienting world of forms, as well as an exercise manual full of tips on various mysteries you can apply to your illusionary life. If you're looking for the daring scholarship of the Jesus Mysteries, you'll be disappointed. But if you're looking for a new perspective on living instead of just being alive, a new occult contact lens for your third eye, or a new reincarnation of the Gnostic spirit, then you'll have yourself a ball with How Long Is Now.
You know much that is hidden, O Tim. Quite.
After reading the book, I was a tad worried that Tim might be evanescing into the tepid shadowlands of New Age. But after our interview, I knew that the boy still has his Dionysian edge that makes fundagelicals hide behind their chick tracks. In the essence of Aeon Byte, Tim doesn't take prisoners but liberates them. Or at least he does the best he can, like I do, or any of us mystic hobbits do somewhere in the volcano realms of the literalist Saurons and their monopoly on the alleged truth.
Every time I try to talk to someone, it's sorry this and forgive me that and I'm not worthy.
So I certainly recommend How Long Is Now if you want to add another note to that jazz tune, sharpen that musical ear Hans Jonas wrote about. I thought I would write about the death of my mother and death in the Gnostic worldview, but I'm still hopelessly trapped in one of Samael's nightmare screenplays my subconscious might have signed on to, because it still believes learning is more important than transcendenting. Maybe it's right, and Tim makes a cynosure case for the learning over transcendenting argument we hear so much among the always debating modern Gnostics. I just don't know. I'm tired, lost, and walking my own Via Dolorosa right now, my beloved truth seekers. All I can hear is Elton John's funeral for a friend, and all I can envision is a woman I love so much that has left a hole in my heart and a hole in the universe itself.
Mother is the name for God on the lips and hearts of all children.
Socrates said death is remembering, and that's all I do these days. For once in my life, I wouldn't mind a little amnesia for a spell or two, or perhaps accepting the fantasy that we'll all meet somewhere in the clouds with our harps and halos. But I'll write a chapter to that part of my gospel when Sophia and Sabaoth decide to carry me one more step through the valley of the shadow of death.
Ernest Hemingway once wrote, "The world is a fine place and worth fighting for." I agree with the second part.
So instead I'll quote from Nietzsche, who speaks about something that represents what Tim and I are trying to do, what we embody in our own ways, and the uphill struggles we never stop facing. And we are not alone, for I know so many of you mystic hobbits are toiling just as hard in your own important ways. Here it is from Thus Spake Zarathustra. When I came to men, I found them sitting on an old conceit, the conceit that they have long known what is good and evil for man, and talk of virtue seemed an old and weary matter to man, and whoever wanted to sleep well still talked of good and evil before going to sleep. I disturbed this sleepiness when I taught. What is good and evil no one knows yet, unless it to be who creates. He, however, creates man's goals and gives the earth its meaning and its future. That anything at all is good and evil, that is his creation. And I bade them overthrow their old academic chairs, and wherever that old conceit had sat, I bade them laugh at their great masters of virtue and saints and poets and world redeemers. I bade them laugh at their gloomy sages, and whoever had at any time sat on the tree of life like a black scarecrow. I sat down by their great tomb road among cadavers and vultures, and I laughed at all their past and its rotting, decaying glory. My wife's longing cried and laughed thus out of me, born in the mountains, verily a wild wisdom, my great broad-winged longing, and often it swept me away and up and afar, in the middle of my laughter, and I flew quivering, an arrow, through sun-drunken delight, away to distant futures with no dream had yet seen. Oh, and this is again Aeon Byte, broadcast from the virtual Alexandria through the God Above God.cam. I am, and I am Abraxas. I am you, I am. This is the Aeon Byte interview, and with us today we definitely have the pleasure of having back Tim Freke to discuss his book, How Long Is Now? How are you doing today, Tim?
I'm doing well, and it's great to be back on the show.
It's definitely my pleasure. Thank you very much for your time. In your last book with Peter Gandi, The Gospel of the Second Coming, the primal imagination brings back the fictional character Jesus to give his story and message. Why did the primal imagination decide it was time to bring in this other fictional character called Tim to give his story and message in his new book, How Long Is Now?
Well, just not enough people listen to Jesus. What can you say? I mean, I thought if Jesus came back and told everyone, that was it. Everyone would sit up. The whole game would be up. We'd be sitting here going, well, that was good. It's all finished. But it didn't turn out that way. Apparently, there's a lot of people there weren't very impressed with Jesus coming back with a few gags and some Gnostic wisdom and a bit of heresy. So, that meant that, I had to get Tim out and get him to stick his neck out and let him tell his story. And that's what I've kind of done, really. I've stood back and gone, right, well, time to write a personal book, because that's something I haven't done.
Would you consider this harder to write since it was a personal book instead of more of a scholarly book?
It was different to write. I wanted to make it very immediate. I wanted to find a new... Every book I've written, really, Miguel, to be honest, I like to approach in a wholly new way. So it's unlike any of the other books I've done, which suits me well as a creative writer, but of course is incredibly stupid if you really you want to just find a style which works and churn them out. And if you do that, then it becomes easier and easier. What I do is make life more and more difficult for myself every time I write by setting down a whole new list of parameters and trying to do something in a completely different way. So I wanted to do this as little vignettes, which were stories from my life, some significant stories, some just very minor stories, but really to give it a sense of authenticity. That I wanted to convey the reality of the life of the author as a philosopher and just as a human being, inquiring into this strange business we call life, and to give it that immediacy, and through that convey the ideas and experiences that I've had, which has led me to the philosophy which is this Gnostic or lucid philosophy. So that was my parameters. That's what I set out to do. You'll have to tell me if I succeeded. That's what I wanted to do, and to take the reader on a real journey of getting to know themselves and kind of getting to know me as well.
Oh yeah, it was a very good journey, in my opinion. You write that your spiritual awakening began early in your life, around 12 years old. Could you tell us, Tim, a little bit about that experience at such a young age?
Yeah, I mean that's where that's where all the trouble started. Really, they say when you study Kabbalah, you shouldn't start till you're 40. Looking back on my life, I can see that probably I'd been much more au fait with the consensus reality if I hadn't stumbled into the deep awake state when I was 12, because it shoots you off on a maddest life possible. But yeah, I guess really, Miguel, I've always been, ever since I can remember, life has seemed profoundly strange. It's that great Gnostic image of the outsider. There's a Gnostic track, Allogenes, and it's that kind of, you don't fit. What is this? You feel alienated from the world in some way. And I felt it as a young person, and would sit for hours on this hill overlooking this sleepy little hometown that I grew up in, just wondering, what the hell is this? What is it to be alive? What is the meaning of it all, and who am I? And looking at all of the adults scurrying around at the bottom of the hill, living their lives, pretending that they had answers to those questions, when it was clear to my child's mind that they didn't have any answers to those questions. And something happened one day when I was doing that. I think one way of seeing it is I just went so deeply into the mystery of the moment the mystery of existence, the mystery of this which is confronting us right now, that the story of Tim just kind of evaporated, and suddenly I was in a place where I didn't feel alienated, where I felt utterly, utterly at home and completely loved, and in a way that I was the love. It was like the top of my head came off and the sky poured in, and there was this huge, spacious presence and a oneness. And it was the first time I tasted this experience that I now call being deep awake or living lucidly. I had no idea what the hell had happened, but I knew that I loved it. I knew that the answers I was looking for lay in a change of consciousness, in a gnosis, as you might say now. I didn't know that word then. In knowing something which you can't put into words, rather than answering the questions with a set of clever words. And that set me off then on an exploration of consciousness, which has been going on ever since. And although, I came down the hill and carried on being an average and probably very difficult, rebellious teenager, I was also on some sort of quest to find out what the hell had happened and to understand it and experience it again.
For lack of better words, what are some of Tim's more other watershed spiritual moments throughout his lifetime that have helped him develop his ideas? I think one that I found very interesting was you finding spirituality and getting your ass kicked by skinheads.
Yeah, there's been a few. That was a little thing that happened, which was very interesting. I was at university at the time. I was about 24, I suspect. And I'd been, in part of my experiments, I was studying philosophy at university, but I was also doing a lot of meditation and Tai Chi Chuan, and I'd shaved my head for the very first time. I actually had hair then to shave. I don't really have much hair to shave anymore, but, a little bit. But I had the hair there, shaved it all off, so I looked like a Buddhist monk or someone who had, in those days, it was odd because people assumed you might be ill or it was violence. So it was an odd thing. And I went to the train station to pick up my girlfriend. And as I was walking into the train station, I saw these group of skinheads, one of which was this huge guy, and they were molesting an elderly gentleman. And I need to tell you, I'd also been fasting for 5 days. So I was floating around. I don't know if you've ever done long fasts, but you really, by the 5th day, it feels great. But you're just floating sort of 3 feet above the earth. It's kind of, ooh. And I was reading Gandhi's autobiography about nonviolence, and that was in my pocket of my coat. And then there was these skinheads in front of me, and so I just, I was looking at them, and they started looking at me, and as soon as they saw me, they left this elderly guy and went for me. And this huge guy, really tall skinhead, came up to me, towered over me, and just said, "Do you want a smack in the mouth?" To which I said, "No, thanks." But it wasn't. It was an either-or question. I hadn't understood that. So it was, do you want a smack in the mouth, or would you prefer a headbutt? And so I got the headbutt, and this head came crashing down, and I collapsed on the floor. But what was so fascinating to me, which taught me a lot, especially about the nature of nonviolence and Tai Chi, really, was that I was in such an altered state because of the fasting and meditation that there was no fear. I'm sure any other time there would have been, but for that moment there was no fear. And I just crumpled onto the floor in this very serene state, just like observing the whole thing just unfold, with no anger, no fear, no reaction. And the other skinheads all kind of came in around me going, let's start kicking me, saying, "No, he's mine, and swearing and going. And I could have been in real trouble. But the funny thing was, because of the state I was in, something strange happened, which was they all started arguing amongst themselves. And suddenly there was a whole group of skinheads all attacking each other, going, "Get off, he's mine, no, I want him, no, he's mine." And this huge brawl started amongst the skinheads. And literally, they moved away from me. I just stood up, looked at them, thought, "That's crazy," walked off to the gentleman's toilets and watched my eye come up in a huge big bump like some sort of cartoon. But I was untouched. And I think what I saw, and it stayed with me ever since then, was what happens to you, the way that life unfolds, is very dependent on your state of consciousness. I think in another time, in another place, I could have been really hurt. But because of the way that particular moment, the state of consciousness I was in almost made it impossible for them to actually hit me. And I think that's what Tai Chi is really about, and Satyagraha, the whole Gandhian idea, there it was, suddenly, like, actually being lived out. So there's lots of little things like that in the book, as you know, where I just kind of want to just take an idea but explore it through a real experience.
Although you are very well known for your work with Peter Gandi on Christian Gnosticism, it seems you've always been a pantheist from the beginning with your first book that you wrote on Taoism. How do you reconcile your views with the seeming dualism of Gnosticism?
Well, for me, I mean, I get the pleasure of being an heretical Gnostic, which is quite an achievement, I think.
Yeah, that's almost an impossibility.
Yeah, but somehow I've managed. Because for me, the key to understanding Gnosticism, well, Gnosticism, as you well know, is a huge area, and there's very many different forms of Gnosticism. So the Gnosticism that speaks to me is not dualistic so much as about polarity. That the key to understanding these traditions is that on the deepest level, and the Tao has got this right from the start, they are both dual and non-dual at the same time. They're based on the idea of polarity, and a polarity is the central idea, I think, in How Long Is Now. Because a polarity is a paradox. You know, if you think of any polarity, it's opposites, left and right. And left can't be right and right can't be left. They're opposites. But they can only exist together. You can't have one without the other, in and out. You know, any polarity you can think of, they exist together, but they're opposites. And understanding that paradox, for me, completely opens up the nature of life. Because it's dual and non-dual at the same time. Our conscious experience is fundamentally based on duality. Self and other. This moment now, we're experiencing that. Everything we're experiencing is, you know, I'm in my office now, I'm looking out and there's the garden, and the garden is separate from the office because one is not the other. Everything is dual. And yet, on this deeper level, there is this oneness. And what you get with Taoism is that very clearly stated right from the start. There's the Tao, and then there's yin and yang. And I think what Gnosticism is saying is something very, very similar, actually. There's a fundamental unity of the one, and then its expression through duality. And those two are both concurrently true. So that's how I reconcile it.
Yeah, like you write, you and Peter both decided one night that you're both great souls and assholes at the same time, right?
There you go. There's the polarity in a very, very down-to-earth way. I mean, I put in, because so much of my life has been dominated by an ongoing conversation with Peter that we still have most days. You know, I'll phone him most days and we'll talk philosophy for an hour. Just because we're both obsessed by the big question, what the hell is this? And we're still having a conversation about it. So I put in a few of the conversations in the book. And that's one of the ones we had. It's just, look, when you look at yourself, there's a duality. And yet they're both, there's not two selves, there's just two aspects of one unity. And you look at it one way and, we're all great souls. Look at it another way, we're all arseholes. And I've never met anyone for whom that's not true. It's a great relief realizing it.
Another thing you address in your book, and you wrote about and thought about it in your younger days, and people like myself included, who have always pondered, wandered, and struggled with, is that perhaps the only way to gain enlightenment or gnosis or awakening is to run off to some cave and meditate 12 hours a day. But don't you write that it's possible to attain the state of enlightenment by actively participating in the mundane world?
Well, I'd go further. I'd say that, I really don't want the withdrawn life. I mean, I came so close to get. I nearly became a friar a couple of times.
Wow.
Really close. And I had a whole trip going. I picked up, I think, from the East mainly, this idea that, if you were a first-class spiritual seeker, then you were celibate and gave everything to it and withdrew. And if you weren't up to that, then you could be a householder and do your best, but you probably wouldn't get very far. My experience has been the opposite. My experience has been, they're both great. I mean, there's no value judgment in there, but I feel like the turning point for me was becoming a father. When I became a father, and suddenly what became obvious to me was this philosophy of polarity. And that for me is just huge. Because what I realized was that although I was experiencing this transcendental oneness and was entering it in ways that I'd never would have dreamed possible, fundamentally, I was in love with the separateness. I was in love with the personal life. I was in love with my children and my little life of Tim, and that I didn't want to be non-attached. I wanted to be attached to these little babies. I wanted to care. I wanted my heart to break if something happened to them. I wanted to be a vulnerable, ordinary human being and to enter into the human adventure. And what that gave me was the insight I needed to be able to frame this lucid philosophy, which goes, look, this awakening isn't from the world. This awakening is like lucid dreaming. You suddenly, you enter a state that I call lucid living. You see that you're both in the dream of life as a separate individual, and then ultimately there's one of us dreaming the whole thing. And when you're in touch with both of those, you can actually enter into the dream and engage with the separateness with real passion. And that's what I wanted to do, and that's what I've done, is to actually go, come on, let's live this. You know, he's not going to be here for long, Tim. He's here, you know, he's going to be here for long. So why not really milk it for the pleasure and the drama and the vulnerability of being human?
Tim, on the same theme, again, and I'm sure you've pondered this much, many of us are taught these days in esoteric circles that the ego is a blockage to reaching our divinity. Yeah, I mean, you've heard it all, you know, we need ego death or kill the ego, or the ego is the enemy or something like that. But don't you argue that the ego can actually be beneficial in awakening?
Yeah, I think this all comes from this. I mean, people use the word ego in lots of different ways, but in the way that you're just using it then, I think it's absolutely crazy. You know, I have my kids. I have kids. I am not there going, don't build up an ego, don't build up an ego, don't be a separate self. Don't you know you don't really exist? Everything's one. I'm trying to help them build up a separate self, because they need that. They need boundaries. They need individuality. I want them to become so separate, there's no one else in the whole world like them. They're thinking for themselves, their unique expressions of life. And that's what I would aim for myself also. Now, the idea that suddenly you've got to get rid of all of that, having spent 20 years or whatever it is building it up, just seems crazy to me. And it's because we get into this either-or thinking. You know, either we're all one and you experience enlightenment, or you think you're a separate self and you're lost in the illusion. What I'm suggesting is that everything's predicated on polarity, and the solution isn't either-or, it's both and. You are both a unique individual, and on a deeper level, there's one of us. And there is one awareness within which everything's arising. If you're lost in the separateness, life will be hell. If you try and get rid of the separateness, you will never succeed. And you will be constantly on a spiritual path that never arrives anywhere. You'll be, suddenly big experience lost. If you see that you can experience both at the same time, because the oneness, what we really are, is the constant background to every experience, then you enter this lucid, like a lucid dream. The dream is continuing, but you know that your deeper identity, you have a gnosis of your deeper identity, which is one with all, and there's this love. So for me, the ego in that sense becomes the foundation from which we can experience our deeper being. And suddenly you look at life and go, well, it's not some big mistake. It's what's allowing us to wake up to oneness. Or put it in a mythological way, the one is appearing to itself to be many so that it can know that it's one. And that's where we're at. We are appearing to be many, and through this amazing experience of being alive, we can come to a gnosis that there's really one of us. But it doesn't mean that suddenly you don't stop being Miguel and I stop being Tim, and all of that's still there. Of course it is. Where's it going to go? It just means it's seen in a new light.
Yeah, and I'm sure, Tim, a lot of people ask you often about magic potions and scrolls in order to attain a sense of wholeness. But in your book, How Long Is Now, you give some actual techniques you've cultivated throughout your lifetime. Could you give us a few of them? I think meditation is obviously a big one in your life, right?
To enter the deep awake state? Yeah, I mean, meditation's been a big thing for me. But it's important to, what is meditation? Well, for me, it's two things, I guess. One is it's doing what I did as a child. It's very natural. It's actually entering what I call the mystery of the moment. When you're so caught up in the dream, in the story, when I'm so caught up in the story of Tim, that I don't notice the actual mystery of being. That I don't notice that fundamentally I don't know what's going on. This is the paradox for me. I'm a writer of books and a purveyor of words, but fundamentally I haven't got a clue because they're just words. What I'm face to face with is so beyond words to express that I'm breathless. It's what it is. It's amazing. And so entering that sense of wonder and mystery is a key for me to enter the deeper wake state. And then it allows me to become conscious that I'm conscious, to be conscious of my deeper being, to be conscious of that which is experiencing all of this amazing flow of shapes and colors and forms and thoughts. And that's when the doorway opens up for a knowing of what I am. And the reason that it's so mysterious is you're knowing yourself as a subject. You're knowing what you are as the subject, not as an object. And so you can't know it in the normal way, which is why it's a gnosis. It's not knowing like I know I'm standing in this room or I know I'm speaking to you. It's something which there's no subject and object. It's just knowing that you are a subject. And I can know that because I'm experiencing all these objects. So by paying attention to my being conscious of being conscious, that opens up a realization that my deeper nature is not in this. That as awareness, as that which is witnessing this, I'm not in the dream, just like a dreamer isn't in the dream. It's the other way around. This is in the dreamer. This life is in what we are. And that's a whole twist. That really messes with your knowing. But as you enter into it, it becomes more and more obvious.
Yeah, you also talk about a technique called witnessing.
Yeah, that's the same thing, really. Traditionally it's often called witnessing, where you start to be conscious that you are that which is experiencing this. You're witness. I'm witnessing talking to Miguel on the phone. I'm witnessing breathing in and out. I'm witnessing my thoughts coming and going. And as you do that, you start being conscious then of what is it that's witnessing it. And that is what we call I, or our being. I call it awareness. But the real question is then, where is it? Where is awareness? Once you know yourself to be awareness, it gets really exciting because you think, well, where the hell is it? Because it feels like it's in your head, or you think it's in somebody else's head when you look at them, but it's not in their head. If you opened up their head and had a look through, you'd never find awareness. It's just not in there. There's a lot of gook and brains and stuff, but there's no awareness.
Right.
It's not in there, so where the hell is it? And I think that the answer is found in all the great esoteric traditions, which is, look, it's the other way around. This is like a dream. It exists within awareness. It exists within the great mind. And once you see that, then you can start to be conscious that that's what we really are. We are that one awareness.
Right, like Joseph Campbell said, is the mind the vehicle of consciousness, or is consciousness the vehicle of the mind?
Yeah.
I guess that was his co-end for people.
Yeah, I love him. Isn't he great? God, we owe so much to all these people that have gone before us and opened up the way. I just feel so grateful to them.
Another one, you give a lot, but one more is the topic of entheogens. I like the fact that you've actually done the Santo Daime Brazilian, because I've done it too, and it's an amazing experience. What are some advice and caveats you would give to people who might want to try entheogens to expand their consciousness?
I think it's very much follow your heart, do what's right for you. I knew very early on in my life I wanted to do anything to play with consciousness, at least once. There's some things I only did once. I haven't written about it before, and I wanted to. I needed to kind of pay homage to all my teachers, and that was one of them. Because, my first experience on LSD when I was a teenager will be a day I will never forget in my life. It took me back to that deep awake state that I tasted when I was younger. Other things had too. It's not the only thing which did it, but it did do it. And it showed me other things which were unique. And, if you like the ayahuasca and the Santo Daime, which you were talking about, or any of these things, peyote, just any of them, DMT, there's so many. And they all do something different, but they open up, if you're an explorer, then it's hard to resist exploring because you just want to dive in and find out what's there. And I really respect the people that have explored it, again, who've opened up the ways, made it available, and I've thoroughly enjoyed exploring it. Like I said at a talk recently, so I don't, You know, these days I don't do drugs anymore. But hey, you know, I don't do them any less either. So.
Well, that's good. That's good. That's your path.
No, I actually don't do deep drugs very much because they're so disruptive as you get older. They just take it out of you, don't they? They rip you in a way that
your body.
I can't work it out. Was it just that when I was younger I was so much more resilient, or was it simply that when I was younger I had longer to recover because I had nothing to do? I don't know which it was, but either way, you know, they rip you. Now I'm older, you know, you need serious recovery time. It's a big adventure. I think the key, and I think this is why so many young people are attracted to them, and if it's done in a healthy way, with respect, with consciousness, that's the key. For me, it was always a sacrament. It was always, I'm going to do this, and I want it to show me something about life. And it did, big time, because I approached it in that way. If you approach it in another way, if you're trying to escape something, or you just want it recreationally, then it will be different. And, you know, sometimes that can be negative, for sure. But for me, especially, it was like having built up this separate self, to have the chance to temporarily dismantle it and see something else was really, really helpful, because it was a return to that knowledge of being that you have as a very small child, where you're just seeing color for the first time and just in awe of green, or, you know, the fact that the flower is. And just being able to see all of that and allowed me never to forget things, which I think a lot of human beings just forget and never see again until they reach their deathbed, and then an awful lot of them see it again. It's kind of a bit late then, but they do.
And Tim, I'm sure you must get this in your seminars a lot. You know, you and I are talking from the top economies of the world. How do you explain the whole concept of death and suffering and, basically a very screwed up world we live in? I mean, how do you stay positive?
I don't stay positive. I become more and more negative. I recently looked at myself and thought, oh, this is good. You know, you just live a life, you know. So I was a kind of explorative, rebellious, enthusiastic teenager, but I had this Gnosis developing. I was a very committed and serious and whatever 20-year-old, but this Gnosis was here. I became a family man and did all of that, and there was this Gnosis developing. And I kind of feel like since I've turned 50, I'm starting to develop grumpy old man, because the world just looks, just such a mess. But there's this Gnosis. And for me, it's not about being positive or negative. That, you can look at the world in two ways. And what I do is I look at it in two ways. I look at it one way, it stinks. All of that really, really stinks. But I look at it another way, and it's an utter miracle, and I absolutely adore it, even with all of that suffering. And what's happened in me now is that they both sit together. They both happen at the same time. I never experienced one without the other. I used to want to have yum without yuck, to get rid of the nasty and just keep the nice. I've realized now that the world's based on polarity. That's never ever going to happen. But what I can do is appreciate how good it is as well. And what I've seen, even with death, a lot of people around me have died recently. And what I've seen is that it's shit, especially when they're young, and, it's a tragedy. But when there's this knowing and this love, the love mitigates the suffering and brings a poignancy and a beauty to it. Now, obviously, that's not always true, but it's lovely when it is true. And, the only thing that I can do in response to the madness of the world is reach deep into my compassion, because it is mad. It's still crazy. And there's a place in me where I feel as alienated from it now as I did when I was a kid. And I suspect I always will. Because, you want it to be different. But this is the dream. This is what we've got. This is the mad world we've got to work out.
Yeah, at the same time, towards the end of the book, you are pretty optimistic about man's spiritual evolution, aren't you?
Oh, yes, I am optimistic. Yes, you're right. I am, because I think there's a movement through, but I don't expect that optimism necessarily to touch me. What I mean by that is, I don't think that we're going to see the perfect world in 2012. I think we'll probably see just another continuation of this long, ongoing process. But that the process is happening, that I am convinced about. That, I am an evolutionist just because I see evolution in life, everywhere. And I think the modern myth of evolution is a powerful one, that it is evolving, and consciousness is the latest thing. Here we are, we're conscious. That's what marks us out. Not only are we conscious, we're conscious of being conscious. That's the real thing that marks us out. Animals are conscious, but we're conscious of being conscious. And what that means is that if we pay attention to this conscious of being conscious, that's when the gnosis happens. So I feel there is this movement towards conscious oneness. And when conscious oneness happens, there's this love. And when they feel the love, you want to be of service. And when you want to be of service, you can start contributing towards solving the suffering and lessening it and making the world a better place. Now, how long all that will take and whether there's ever an end to it, I don't know. But that is happening, I feel confident. And then it's enough then to feel like, well, you and I get the chance in our short lives as these separate individuals to contribute something. And how great is that? To contribute a verse to this magnificent symphony, this great song of life. So for me, that's where the optimism is, that we are moving in that direction and that we each get to play a part in that. Maybe, like you're doing, touching lots of people through radio, but could be just in the people in your little circle, in your hometown. Doesn't make any difference, really. That one is moving, or just through your own changing your own state of consciousness. Just that is happening allows the possibility of coming to what I call a deep awake world, that we can actually glimpse what it would be like. And things have got so much better already because we're more conscious. I mean, I've never seen a war. I've never seen a war. There's been wars in Europe constantly, but not in my life. Now, that's a huge thing that the generations before did for me. So we are moving in that right direction.
In your book, and I'm sure you can get this question as well, Tim, is it refers to you as a spiritual authority. What do you mean by spiritual authority?
Yes, I know. I couldn't help I wanted to put that in because, that's what they put on the back of my books. We live in this strange world where, because the nature of capitalism, everything has to be sold. Well, there's some things which really shouldn't be sold, but everything has to be sold because that's the only way we can do this exchange business. And because there's so many people trying to sell anything, everyone needs to shout louder than everyone else. So with spirituality, it's such a mess today because, here's the grumpy old man, you see, it's such a mess because it's got bigger and faster. It's like more, bigger, better enlightenment now in 3 easy steps. The 7 secrets that will give you everything you want in 2 minutes. How to make your life perfect right now.
Yeah,
now. And like, whoa, yes, he's an authority on everything, and he's a fully enlightened master, and all this BS, because it is all BS. That's all BS. It really, why I put it in the book was to go, look, really, this is who I am. I'm a guy like everyone else is, like the reader is a person struggling through with some experiences, a handful of ideas, and a huge amount of mystery. And if you live to be 80, you're here for 4,000 weeks, so don't expect too much. Because it's a very, very, very big universe. So let's have a little bit of humility here. But on the other hand, I have written 30 books on every single tradition of spirituality. I have explored it extensively, and compared to a lot of people, I guess, I have some knowledge and want to share that. But fundamentally, we all stand naked before the mystery.
So that's why you call yourself a stand-up philosopher. I think you wanted to make philosophy something that's approachable to most people, right?
Yeah, I mean, the whole spiritual teacher thing, which is what I would have slipped into anything, is completely abhorrent to me. I just hate it, and if I see another well-meaning person talking quietly next door to a bunch of flowers, I will just retch. I just can't. Sorry, it's grumpy old man day today. I don't know why. It's just coming out. It's just, no. For me, it's like this is philosophy is something which is exciting. It's fun, and it just needs to be presented in a way which is right for the person. If you are a very quiet, sit by flowers type of person, go ahead and do that. I'm really not. I like to be dynamic. I like to have fun. I like to laugh. I like to play at the edge. And for me, that's why I love philosophy, because it does all those things. It's right on the edge. It's where you can question anything. It's a magnificent source of humor, and it's a place that you can go right into the darkest corner. And I love that. So for me, stand-up philosophy is about saying, look, this should be entertaining. This can be entertaining. And it used to be. I mean, the ancient world was full of stand-up philosophers who would travel from place to place talking philosophy and entertaining crowds. And I quite like the idea of reinvigorating that rather than some dusty, sort of dry, academic, arid thing.
Well, as long as you don't end up like Diogenes talking to a statue.
I can see it. You know? So next time we do the interview, I'll probably be talking to statues. It's the way it's going, Miguel. I can feel it coming on. I love
all grumpy you'll be doing that.
He was a grumpy philosopher, wasn't he? He was great. See?
And Tim, could you tell us a little bit about the Alliance of Lucid Living, the All, and how it came about and its purpose?
Yeah,
and so forth?
Sure. Well, I kind of had this vision. A lot of people who come to my events have been wanting to keep coming back and tasting it, because what we do is allows a transformation in consciousness to actually happen, and I do these events in the US, and the UK, and Europe, and people come and they enter this thing. So it's one thing to think about it, but when you actually experience it, and nearly everybody does, you just go, oh God, this is fantastic, I want to come back and experience it again. So they do. And so sort of a community is beginning to form. And it's not just the people that meet physically, it's also people who've been touched by the books, who want to connect via the internet and so forth. So I set up this Alliance for Lucid Living, or the ALL, the All, because I like the idea of join the all. And that's what it is. It's a chance to enter a community of individuals. These people are Gnostics one way or another, really. They're freethinkers. They don't want to join a cult. They don't want to be followers of anybody. They want to be explorers. And they want to learn from those that have got something to teach, and to share what they've learned with the people who want to learn that. And what we've got is a loose embryonic community of deep awake people. And at the moment, it's small, but it's really lovely. I'm really enjoying it. And there's a website now, theall.org, and there's information on my website, timfreke.com. People can plug into that and start feeling that they're not alone, because an awful lot of people who do experience waking up also experience the alienation. They often come together. And what that means is you can feel very cut off, and you need to be in contact with other people who will tell you you're not crazy, or at least they're also crazy, and so it's okay. And that's what I think we can do for each other.
I'm sure a lot of listeners want to know, what exactly do you mean by deep awake?
Deep awake is my, I feel nervous with using old language, because people use it in so many different ways, and because they carry so many preconceptions. So if I talk about enlightenment, and I do sometimes, but if I do, it comes with so much baggage. If I talk about Gnosis, it comes with so much baggage. So what I try and do is, well, it's Carl Jung who said, you must take these perennial experiences and melt them down and put them into new language. And I've always felt like that. So what I've done is try to develop a value-free language which is accurate. So I talk about deep awake, by which I mean, when this is awake, and then there's deep awake, is when you experience this deepest ultra-awake state. I also call it lucid living, because it's very much like lucid dreaming. So I've tried to find a language which can talk about these same things that people have been talking about for centuries, but with a freshness that will allow you to actually look at the moment in a new way, and not go chasing some concept. I want to be enlightened. You've got some idea of what that might mean. Okay, well, I've got nothing to say about that. But I can tell you about being deep awake. It may turn out to be the same thing. But don't worry about that either. Just let's look at the moment. Let's look at who we are. Let's investigate it. And then when you experience it, then you can call it any name you like. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah, very much. And you also, in your past books, you obviously give plenty of warnings about the dangers of orthodox, or as you call it, literalist thinking. But in this book, you also give a small warning on don't go to the extreme, to the bubblegum New Age side. How would you tell an individual to walk that straight path, or are we talking polarities again?
To me, your greatest ally is doubt. Doubt makes you conscious. Doubt everything. Ask the difficult questions. Ask them of yourself. I mean, what I do as a philosopher, my life, and that's what I'm trying to get across in the book, is spent doubting myself, doubting my own ideas, because when I do that, it's really exciting, because they change and grow. And my feeling is, when you come across people teaching stuff, or groups, or books, or anything, hold it up to doubt. And if it holds up to that, if you're still impressed, if your bullshit detector's hasn't come on, then follow it. But if you get back, you shouldn't doubt, or your attitude is wrong, or you're stuck in your head, or any of those things, then stay well clear, because anything that really is about making you more conscious will encourage doubt, which is why, of course, all the religions say the biggest sin is doubt. That's what will individuate you. That's what makes you conscious.
And I'm sure another thing you would add is always redefine, reinterpret, and reanalyze your ideas. I'm sure in 4 years, how long is now might even be outdated to you, wouldn't it be?
Well, it's getting. The problem is, Miguel, that the book. I finished that book over a year ago. That's how long it takes to come out. It's moved on.
Already, yeah.
Already, you'd want to say, and even in the very least, there's a new voice emerging that I want to say it in to be authentic. That was authentic a year ago. Now it's got to be something else. It's a year later. So yeah, it all moves on, and I hope certainly in 10 years, if I live that long, to look back and go, oh yeah, right, and now it's moved a huge distance since then, because then life will stay exciting. The mystery can never be reached, which means your ideas about it and your experience of it can keep evolving. There's always further to go, which is kind of nice. I like that feeling. It'd be awful to think you've arrived. That's what I don't like about this kind of fully enlightened thing. You think, oh, how dull. You've arrived. It's fully enlightened. He's discovered he doesn't exist. Wow. And what do you do now? You sit by a bunch of flowers and talk quietly. Well, that's fantastic. I wish that happened to me.
Well, maybe ignorance is bliss. Who knows? Maybe we'll go full circle at the end of the day.
It's a beautifully ambiguous sentence, the ignorance is bliss thing, because obviously, it's normally used to mean if you don't inform yourself, you're just wandering around blissfully stupid. And that's true. But also, there is a different truth hidden in there as well, which is, the mystery, not knowing, or knowing that you don't know, truly is bliss, in my experience. To enter deeply into the mystery, not to sit on the outskirts. To hover on the outskirts of the mystery is hell. That can be a really scary place. But to dive right into it, and that's what, for me, when you were talking about deep drugs, that's one of the things they do. You go on a trip, you take some ayahuasca, you take some LSD or some ecstasy or whatever it is. You have to let go and dive into the mystery. If you don't, you'll have a terrible time. But if you let go and dive into it, you'll have a fantastic time. And I learned that then, when I was young. And I think it's true of life. Life is like a trip. And if you hang on to your ideas about it and then it will be hell. But if you just dive into the mystery of it and the flow of it, and go with the rushes as it comes up and down, and just stay with it, then it's absolutely ecstatic.
Well, that's great. And one last question, Tim, which we discussed a little bit in our last interview and the interview before, and you write in your book, how goes your struggle with the Archon tobacco these days?
Well, I'm not smoking right now.
Oh, okay,
not right now. No,
right now, yeah.
No, it's been about 6 months. It's been about 6 months. And that's being a dad. I have to tell you, if I wasn't a dad, I'd still be smoking. Because I'm not good at denying myself pleasure. I do love pleasure, and I'm big into pleasure. I think pleasure is a great thing, and we should give ourselves and each other as much pleasure as we possibly can. And it is a great pleasure. But, I'm also a responsible dad, and so I've had to curtail that pleasure and find some others to take the place. And you, because it's no longer cigarettes, coffee, and Gnosis.
No, I'm sorry. I still, caffeine and cigarettes is still my vice.
No.
Like Abraham Lincoln said, a man with no vices probably has no virtues.
I think that's true. And Peter, my dear friend, who I write with and is responsible for so much of the work we've done together, he still comes down here and, he's smoking away, and I have to stand close to him and just enjoy some of that passive as much as I can.
Well, we do what we can. All right, Tim. Well, I think that's all the time we have today. Once again, thank you very much for coming on Aeon Byte, formerly Coffee, Cigarettes, and Gnosis, and giving us some of your time and sapience.
It's been a real pleasure. I've had great fun. Thank you for having me back on the show.
Oh, pleasure's all mine. You have a good day now,
and
Tim.
You.
Perhaps you are one of those remarkable people who experience an overpowering realization of the divinity of existence. You suddenly know that everything is divine and that within you lies an ocean of God. Will you know this all of the time and every day? No. You will crest and fall and submerge again into the mundane. The realization of divinity as the be-all and end-all, as the substance of your very self, that within you which you live and move and have your being, does not dominate every day, although you wish it would. The ordinary world of aches and pains and approaching death, of trouble, temptation, sin, stress, and loss seems to rule almost all the time. And yet, sometimes you can seize what you seek and see glory everywhere and know yourself to be divine. If you are one of those people, you are one with the Gnostics. You know what you truly are, that you are God, just as everyone else is. But as a Gnostic, your existence in this ordinary and difficult world puzzles you. You ask, how did I come to be here? You don't seem to belong here. You belong in a world, a realm of divinity. And it certainly seems that that divine realm is not everyday reality. But if, in full reality, everything that exists is God, why don't we always know this? Why do some people never even think it possible to be what, in their depths, they really are? Why don't we know who we are? How did we come to forget? What holds us back from perpetual realization of our divinity, and what traps so many people into denying that their own divinity is even conceivable? These are the Gnostics' questions. The secret book of John is the Gnostics' answer. Gnostics know that God is all and they themselves are God. They experience this knowledge, this realization, and know that everyone else could share their experience. But they are continually thrown back into the seemingly hard material reality that tells them that they are merely flawed humans, kin to apes, doomed to die, ruled by a judgmental creator God who often does not show a fondness for people at all. Gnostics rebel against their churches and their priests, their Bible-based pastors whose obsession with God's supposed desire to control behavior seems not to be what true religion is about. To Gnostics, true religion, elite spirituality, is a realization of the divinity of every person, an experience of ascent to the divine homeland. It is a knowledge of the way we once were as God, and one of the processes by which God came to be so self-forgetful as to become us, mere human beings under the control of another lesser God. Those are the lessons taught in the Gnostic Gospels. Gnosticism is a religion of rebels, creative thinkers whose works were systematically destroyed by Orthodox Christianity between the 2nd and the 6th century CE. Gnostics were the other to the growth of orthodoxy. They lived in the home of heresy, for they were the source of self-assertiveness against the episcopal demand for sameness. They persisted in the shadows, in certain Sufi sects, in the Christian Cathars movement, and perhaps even among the Knight Templars and the Rosicrucian orders. Only recently have the old Gnostics spoken aloud again. Their speech resounds in the documents of the Nag Hammadi library buried 1700 years ago in Upper Egypt, discovered again in 1945 and read today by spiritual seekers throughout the world. Their main documents, their central myth, Their theory of the origin and structure of reality is a text called the Secret Book of John. In this text we learn how God fell and became us, and how,